welcome to the UNTIED Podcast, where we unravel the knots of life with faith, wisdom, and encouragement, because together we're here to untie from tradition and embrace truth through powerful Bible teaching. My name is Garrett Picks. I'm one of the hosts of the show, along with two of my very good friends, Corey and Tyler. And today we've got a great show in store for you, where we're going to talk about something that probably is near and dear to all of our hearts, and that is worship. And so we have some questions and things that we're going to talk about and ask. We're also going to talk about some books that we would like to recommend to you. We decided to do that. We'll explain more of that here shortly. But we're glad that you have joined us today for Season 2, Episode 3 here on the Untied Podcast. And so we hope that you are doing well. Hope that whenever you're watching or listening to this, the weather is a little bit better than it is today, at least here in Oklahoma. It's very snowy, dreary, and icy, but we hope that if it is cold and going through all this winter weather, that you're warm and safe, and we're glad that you're tuning in right here to us. And so, guys, let's go ahead and start it off. What's been cooking in your life and your ministry and on your grill?
Well, I haven't been cooking a lot lately for some reason. I don't know. Now that I think about it, I don't know why that is. But we just had a new wood fire pizza restaurant open up in downtown Martin. And nice. I will tell you, my favorite kind of pizza is Hawaiian. I usually get it with pepperoni instead of the ham. I don't know why there's such a big debate about whether pineapple goes on pizza or not, because it's a fruit. And I want to try to remind people that, first of all, that's not the weirdest thing people put on pizza. Anchovy, what in the world are you thinking there? But, or an olive. I don't get that one either. But anyway,
ooh, I love olive.
A fruit, the whole like base of the pizza is tomato sauce. And tomato is a fruit. And so anyway, I don't understand that debate. But anyway, they have what they call a hillbilly Hawaiian. And instead of Canadian ham, it has shaved country ham. And instead of chunks of pineapple, it has a pineapple chutney that's all across it. And I usually get jalapenos on it because I like the heat and the sweet mixture. But they have a different spin, and Garrett and I were eating, my Garrett, not our Garrett, but my Garrett, and I were eating there, and we were going to split a pizza. He likes Hawaiian too. And I said, do you want to try this as is? And he said, yeah, and we did. And we found that it really worked. It had pickled okra on it. And I don't know if y'all have ever had pickled okra, but
I love pickled.
Anyway, I do too, but I never thought about putting sliced pickled okra on a pizza. But man, it was larraping. But anyway, so that's the adventurous eating that I've had the last week, is a hillbilly Hawaiian. The country ham is, man, such an improvement over the Canadian bacon. But the pickled okra was a nice twist too. So
that's interesting. I have never even heard of anybody putting pickled okra on pizza. That's interesting.
Nope.
I love pickled okra.
I do too.
So I would probably try it. Now, what's the name of this place?
Oh, why did you ask me that? I don't know. Let me look it up and I'll tell you.
I was trying to think. We have eaten at one in Germantown, right around Germantown, Tennessee. That is it's a pizza place just like that, and I'm trying to think of what it is called. But you go through the line and you know they put whatever you want on there, and then they put it over the fire, and you know, a few minutes you get it. Man, it was really good. I'm trying to think of what it was called, but
well,
I think
this
that's
one
the
is
best pizza.
This one is a local owner. He owns another couple of restaurants around in the area, but this is his first pizza place. Actually, the name of it is Wood Fire Pizza Kitchen. I thought that's what it was, something like that,
Wow.
but I didn't want to. And it's interesting too, because in the upstairs they've got like a bunch of pinball machines and old arcade games like from when I was a kid. They've got the walls decorated kind of in that 80s kind of feel. And it was funny. We walked up there to play some video games, and as soon as we got up there, Garrett said, "Is this what it was like to grow up in the 80s?" And I said, "This is exactly what it was like to grow up in the 80s." Because both of us asked our wives if they had any quarters before. I said, we would ask our mom, can we have some quarters to go?
Yeah.
And anyway.
That's right. That place in Germantown is called Pyro's Pizza. Pyro's Fire Fresh Pizza. It's really good. So if you're ever around Germantown, you need to go check it out. I think it's in a few other places too, but that's definitely a good spot.
Yeah. We go through Germantown on our way to the airport.
Parker, my oldest son, he interned with the church in Germantown. So that's the only reason that we know about this place. Man, I'm trying. I think it's there's a donut place down there too that my family loves. I think it's called Gus's, or anyway, I'll think of it. But it has the best donuts. Puts Krispy Kreme to shame. It's not in the best part of town. It's probably why it's so good. But the first time that we went down to visit him, I'd never really been. I'd been through Tennessee to go to polishing the pulpit, and that was about it. But we took a vacation, and we went and saw him during that time, and we ate at Pyro's, and we ate at a couple other places. One really good chicken place that was in some old house. It was unbelievable. But we went down the middle of Memphis on that main street down there that everybody loves, and where the Grizzlies, where their arena
Bill
is.
Street?
And all. Yeah. And so we go down, and I don't remember the name of the place, but there's a place down there that has, they advertise that they will fry your burgers, and they have grease that's 100 years old. And that's how they make their burgers. And so I was like, we got to go try it. It sounds disgusting, but went in there and it was pretty good. So, there's all kinds of...
I'm betting Gus's is the chicken place you went to.
That might be right. It might be right. I'm trying to think.
If you come back through, there's a really good barbecue restaurant in Germantown called the Commissary. It's really good. And then downtown in Memphis is the Rendezvous. I think Tyler stopped there one time and ate. That's
I've
like
heard of
the historical rib place that I think years and years ago was a speakeasy. You have to go down this little back alley to get to it and whatnot. So
yeah.
If you don't mind almost getting shot, then Rendezvous is a great option.
I think everywhere down there, you better just
middle of the day. I hate downtown Memphis.
Time to go.
It is my least favorite city, which is a bummer because the Bass Pro there is really cool. Barbecue there is good. I've been to the Gus's fried chicken. That was amazing, but it is sketchy.
It is. The Bass Pro there is excellent. Everybody talks about the Bass Pro in Missouri, and it's really nice. But that one takes the cake for me. That's a great Bass Pro. And have you ever taken the elevator to the top?
No, because I'm too cheap.
We did. We took the elevator, and on the way up, you have Bill Dance. I don't know if you guys love to fish or not, but Bill Dance is, he's one of those old fishermen, man. He was on tour, and then he had his show forever. And anyway, Bill Dance is the voice that he's talking about how that happened, that Bass Pro got there, and the story. It's pretty funny, pretty cool story, but. The guy who was going to buy that, he said they were fishing on the Mississippi River, and he said, if I catch a catfish, I think that was 50 pounds or something. He said, if I catch one today, he said, I'm going to buy that. Now think about that for a minute. You have that kind of money. If I catch this, I'm going to buy this. So apparently the pyramid is in the distance. I mean, they can see it. And he caught a 50-pound catfish that day. Bill Dance is in the boat with him. And he went the next day and bought that, which was, if Corey, remind me if I'm wrong, but I think that was the old Grizzlies arena, wasn't it?
They played there. The Memphis Tigers played there. I saw a Garth Brooks concert there.
Did you? Yeah. So he bought that after he did that and converted it into a Bass Pro, and it's awesome.
It's one of the cool places. I mean, you can buy every Bass Pro you go to. They've got the boats out front, but you can actually test drive it out on the Mississippi River.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's a unique environment for sure.
It is. Well, when you actually have like literal ponds inside. Like not just a little stream where you got a few things. No, this one, there are boats that are actually in the water in the building. And there's, bass and crappie and catfish. And I think in one place they even have some trout or something in there. And it's really cool. It's definitely a stop if you're a outdoorsman.
Yeah. And y'all didn't even mention Graceland. So,
I've never been to Graceland. That wouldn't even cross my mind. Although we did there was a statue in the middle of town that we got our picture by Elvis, but didn't go to Graceland. So maybe next time.
Well, what's cooking with you, Tyler?
Oh, it's going to sound crazy, but my wrist. We actually cooked for the college students. We have them over every other Monday night, so we did tacos last night. I think tacos is the easiest. Corey, you've done a lot of hosting. Garrett, you probably have too. But I think tacos is the easiest thing to prep, cook, and enjoy. It's pretty hard to mess up tacos. But I was working on my Mustang.
You can feed a lot of people for a little money with tacos too. That's another good thing.
Yeah. I don't know. Groceries are getting up there in price still. But it's definitely one of the cheaper options still. But this last weekend I was working on my Mustang, and my watch has a metal band to it. And whenever I was welding, I never wore any metal on me. So I wasn't married at the time, but I would never wear any rings. I would never wear any metal watches or any necklaces or anything like that, just because metal is such a conductor of electricity. Well, I'm not welding. I'm working on a car. So I didn't think anything of it. And I've worked on cars for the last, 20 years of my life. And I've just never, seen the need to disconnect the battery out of a car. Well, I saw the need this weekend. I was underneath the car. Natalie's inside. She's making cookies. And I'm reaching up toward the top of the motor from underneath. And my watch grounded to the starter of the car. You've got two terminals that come off of your starter motor. You got 12 volts of electricity running through it. So that got me pretty good. And it cooked my watch, which then cooked my wrist. So mainly second degree with just one spot of third degree burn.
Oh, me.
It was just one of those things where you've got, so much adrenaline running through you that you're not registering pain. So I slid from underneath the car, realized my wrist is burning. So I went to the sink and washed it under cold water. Contacted one of our college deacons who just happens to be a doctor, and he said, yeah, you're just going to want to make sure to keep it covered and sanitized, and you'll be fine. You'll have some pretty mean scars to show. But so
Natalie walked in the kitchen and said, what's cooking?
My wrist. So if you are working on a car near the engine compartment, disconnect the battery. It's a good thing, especially if you're wearing a metal watch. And that was my other mistake, is I almost never wear metal watches. And this day I was, and I just thought, well, I'm going to tinker around on this a little bit. And that was that. So
that was the big deal. Linemen, and I'm sure electricians do this, but linemen, you can't wear any jewelry, wedding ring, all that stuff. You got to take it off whenever you're working.
Yep.
Which is why a lot of people.
I see why.
And I just kind of wear it all the time. I've got the rubber ring, and I've outgrown my fingers have gotten too fat. I can't wear my original wedding ring, and I had to get it off because it was starting to mess with my fingers. So I don't know, hands are getting bigger, but anyway, so I've gotten these I guess they're silicone really, and I've just kind of worn that since then. But
yeah,
it's pretty crazy.
So that's the most random injury that I've ever had, is being electrified by a car starter.
It's also the most random answer to asking on this podcast what's cooking,
been
and you
cooking?
say my wrist.
My wrist is cooking.
I mean, it was smoking. It wasn't even just a little. It was cooking.
He really got into serious with it. Man.
Well, and the watch has one of those. I mean, it's just a Casio Royale for anyone who knows watches, but it just has that metal clasp on it. Well, that got welded shut. And so while the watch is burning hot, I mean, it was red at one point because when it grounded, it connected and stayed there until I could pull it off. So that clasp had welded shut. So I couldn't get the watch off. So I had to get a flathead screwdriver in there and kind of pry it, get it off. And at that point, damage was already done to my wrist. So I would show you, but it's pretty rough looking. So I'll just keep that to myself today.
My goodness. Safety bulletin right here. Take your watch off when you're working on your car.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're okay.
Be untied to your watch when you're working on your car.
Yeah. Or wear leather watch bands. One of the two.
Yeah.
Still live life on the edge.
It's funny. Sometimes you just don't think of stuff like that.
No. And it wasn't, I mean, I was going out there. I thought, I'll work on this for 20, 30 minutes while Natalie's doing something. And, well, that was fun.
Man. Well, live, you learn.
Yeah,
Now,
I guess.
Now you'll be able to teach others.
Well,
Yeah, what's the old John Wayne quote? If you're going to be dumb, you better be tough, or something like that.
Yep. And for everyone, this is a joke. I'm just prefacing that. But speaking about pizza, one of our favorite pizza restaurants here is called Empire Slice House. It's the best. It's number one across the board for everything. Their specialty pizzas are good. It's New York style. They give teachers a 25% discount, so we're obviously big fans of that. But they have a thing on their website that if you get their logo tattooed anywhere on you, it's 50% off of pizzas for the rest of your life.
Oh, wow.
And I told Nat with my scar, I mean, it looks rough. It's going to be rough. And I said, I could probably get a tattoo to, disguise that, make it look better. And I thought, maybe I'll get that Empire Slice House tattoo.
Just have your watch
I would
the
want it
whole time.
Yeah.
Then when you walk in,
I would
take
want it
off.
in writing before I got a tattoo, though.
Yeah.
But it's on their website.
Yeah, but they can change websites. I want a contract before I get it permanently
Dude,
put on
I'm
me.
about to brand myself with your
Yeah.
logo. You better hook me
Yeah,
up.
that's not one you want to come in and say, "Oh, we don't offer that anymore."
Yeah. I told Nat, I said, if I ever did get that, which I'm not going to get that tattoo, but I said, it's almost like, it feels like selling your soul to the devil at some level, where you're putting their brand on you forever.
The mark of
And
the
in
beast.
return, you get right. Yeah, you get some free pizza. Well, half off pizza.
Do they at least have a cool logo?
I mean, I think so. Corey probably wouldn't. Garrett, you probably wouldn't either. It's a pink elephant with a big, Empire.
Okay, let's just stop right there. You're wanting to get a pink elephant tattoo on
Well, okay, so hear me out. The star is going to look like pink, right? So I figured it's going to blend in pretty well.
Okay. This is
I'm trying to
Corey's
figure out
face.
I'm trying to figure out the connection between a pink elephant and pizza.
I'm glad their pizza's good because they.
Like in East Tennessee in the mountains, there are moonshine stores. I could see their logo being pink elephants because there's a connection between moonshine and pink elephants. Not so much the pizza. I don't know.
Do they have a lot of ham on their pizza?
Yeah, I don't know.
You know, those guys were sitting around going, "Hey, we're going to come up with a rule. We're going to come up with this logo, and if anybody was going to tattoo it, we're going to hook them up
Yep.
because we just want to see if somebody will do it." Well, we've got a taker.
Yeah, I know. They technically have 6 different tattoo versions that you can get, but the prominent one, their big logo is a pink elephant with their E. So
Now I have no desire to get a tattoo, but if Carhartt or Mossy Oak or Ford, I might get their logo.
If
for
they
that.
give you 50% off.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about Redhead?
Or Excel TV. Excel TV.
That's
if
right.
That was.
Excel TV would be
If
great. You could put that all around your wrist.
Yeah.
50% off for life. If anybody here gets an Excel TV tattoo around their wrist.
I wonder what the odds of me finding a pink elephant tattoo in a Cracker Jacks box would be that I could put on right before I went in there. And
Oh, man. The water ones.
yeah.
That's funny. Never know what you're going to hear, what we're going to be talking about on What's Been Cooking.
Yep.
That's good stuff. Where is that at? Is that up in Edmond? Where is Empire at?
Oh yeah, they've got them all over the place. There's one by North Mac, right there on May. So if you go over to May and south of Expressway,
Okay.
there's one in Edmond, downtown Edmond on 2nd Street. That's the one that we go to.
Mm-hmm.
They've got one in Midtown. And I think that might have been one of the first ones that they made. And then there's one in Tulsa. They're kind of all over the place. Tulsa, OKC, Edmond. I think there's probably only 4 or 5 of them, but we love it. It's such good pizza.
Yeah.
This'll impress you. Amy Basic loves it. So if it gets the Amy stamp of approval, you know it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. She's a food critic, that's for sure. Fanatic one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you said it's a New York style pizza?
It is. So it's thin crust. What's cool is they sell it by the slice, or at least you can buy it by the slice, and it's like $4.50, and it's huge slices. If you went there and if you weren't like super hungry for lunch, you could get by with 1 slice. Now, I always get 2, and then they have like the pizza of the day. So they've got all of their different creations.
Yeah.
They're big on music too, so a lot of their pizzas are named after music artists. But I mean, I've had a lot of pizza all over the place too. When I was traveling for Bear Valley, I'd always try pizza places because it was cheap.
Right.
And Empire it's climbed to number 1 in my list.
Numero uno. I haven't ever tried it. I'm not a huge pizza guy, but isn't it the Chicago style pizza that the sauce is on top?
Yeah,
The deep
and
dish.
it's thick crust.
It's real deep. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't mind trying that.
For a while, the Paducah Airport, which is about an hour and 10 minutes north of us, they connected through Chicago while Garrett was out at school at Bear Valley. And it was usually about a 1-hour window that he had at O'Hara Airport in Chicago. And that gave him just enough time. There was a place in there that he would go get him a piece of the thick
Yeah.
deep dish pizza to take on the flight then from Chicago down to Paducah. So
Nice.
anyway,
Very nice. Well, guys, we have, I think it was episode 1 that we kind of mentioned. I think Tyler is the one who actually mentioned it, about possibly bringing some books and sharing them with all our listeners and viewers that they could check out that they may enjoy. And so we've just simply we thought just simply we'd do this every other episode. We'd bring a couple of books apiece and throw them out there. And so we've just entitled this segment "Give Me Your Best Books." And so we want to share a couple apiece with you before we get into our main discussion today. So. Corey, do you want to start with a couple of books that you would like to recommend to our listeners and viewers?
sure. I'll start with one of the 2 books, and maybe I'll tell you the other one next time. One of the 2 books that I always use when I do premarital counseling or marriage counseling or whatever, because it's such a needed thing today for even if you're not having marital problems at this time, it's a good thing for you to always read about, study about how to become a better spouse or whatever. But this one is actually, I know both of y'all know these individuals, and probably most people that listen to this know this, but I'm going to recommend it anyway. It's from Wayne and Tammy Roberts, Soulmates, and it's one of the more concise and easy reads that you can recommend to someone, particularly on this topic. Very practical in the way that it's all laid out, and I really do love and appreciate their work. Of course, they do the His Shoe, Her Shoes marriage seminars, and that's a lot of that materials in that book. And the other one, it's a series of books. I think there's maybe 5 or 6 of them now, but I thought, particularly since we're going to talk about worship today, I don't know if y'all have ever seen these before, the Then Sings My Soul books, and there's several of these. They're all written by Robert J. Morgan, and what they are is, I'll just show you kind of what it looks like on the inside here for those of you watching on video. But on the left-hand side, it's like what you would see in your songbook, the words and music, sheet music of a particular song. And on the other side is the story behind that particular song. And I know, Tyler, you may remember when Charles King was a student out at Bear Valley. Charles was always he's a great song leader and a great minister, but one of the things that Charles would do oftentimes in chapel was he'd tell you to turn to number so-and-so in the book, and he's full of these stories. I did a whole series last year of sermons the last Sunday night of each month, and where we would go through, I would kind of group some together that had a common theme or whatnot together, but just to see, Charles would tell these stories that would just have you, and he's a great storyteller, but it would be like, back in 1827, John Smith started out towards California in the covered wagon with his wife and daughter, and he'd tell this story about how a grizzly bear attacked him in the Rocky Mountains, and this heartbreaking story that caused him to be thinking about God, and he wrote this, whatever it might have been. But it's interesting to see the stories that inspired people to write particular songs, or passages that inspired people to write particular songs. It's also, to me, interesting. Some of them you'll see in there, individuals that wrote tons of songs, but also how that a lot of songs were just written by, like, this guy's a store clerk and he'd never written a song before, or this guy is a farmer and in his hobby he just wrote poems. And after he died, his daughter found this trunk with 127 poems that he wrote about God and his faith or whatever. And one of them became this particular song or whatever. But anyway, it's very interesting, to say the least, to read some of these stories and how it will change the way that you sing. You're talking about singing with the understanding, how you think about the songs that you sing sometimes by just knowing the stories behind them. So anyway.
Yeah. I did a lesson a couple of years ago, and it was over, I think it was the Old Rugged Cross. And man, there was some really cool stuff that I found in the history of that song. And so it was pretty powerful. And I also heard a lesson, I want to say it was Chuck Monan, at the Red River Family Encampment a number of years ago. I think it was him. It might not have been him, but I remember he gave a lesson over it, and it was just really, really powerful. So,
yeah.
Really
Well, I'll give you an
cool
example. The song we sing, Stand Up for Jesus, the guy that wrote that was inspired by a preacher who had actually been out to the family farm to see the new threshing machine that they had bought. And the sleeve of his shirt got caught in that threshing machine, and it pulled his arm in, and he ended up tragically losing his arm. And then from complications of that is what he ended up dying. But the guy that wrote the song was there in the room as he was dying, and right before he died, he he motioned for his father to lean down, and he whispered something in his ear. Well, after he passed, the man who wrote the song asked the father, he said, what did he say? He said, he told me, you tell everyone they need to stand up for Jesus. Well, then that inspired him writing this song. Well, one of the lines in that song is, the arm of flesh will fail you. You dare not trust your own. That's a truism that we would all agree with. But once you know the story behind that, you're like, oh, and you never sing it the same way again, Right. So anyway, all of them don't have that kind of a song, story behind them, but some of them do, and it's pretty cool.
That is cool. That is cool. All right, so we've got Soulmates by Wayne and Tammy Roberts, and then Sings My Soul by Robert J. Morgan. Again, we're going to put all of these in the show notes, so if you have any interest in purchasing these, we'll have them down there linked so you can check those out. Tyler, what do you got for us, man?
Well, I'm the liberal friend. So we've got two books written by people who are not members of the church, which is probably almost all of my book collection. But this one I read last year as we were going through our theme for North Mac on spiritual disciplines. Wow, just totally blanked there for a second. I was thinking this year's theme. This year's theme is the good life. Last year's theme was the spiritual disciplines and how we can kind of develop more of an intentionality as we go throughout our spiritual walk. Well, this was one that our whole staff read. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. Comer started a church out in Oregon. I don't agree with a lot of his theology, and that's okay. I tell people all the time, people will ask, well, why do you go to the school that you go to? Why do you read the books that you read? While there is a lot of scripture that is doctrinal and that we need to pay attention to, there's also a lot of spirituality that isn't necessarily doctrinal, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that it's okay to have all of these gray areas in scripture, but what he talks about here is very biblical. He's not going to encourage you to go and worship with instruments or go and speak in tongues, nothing like that. I just think that this in our modern culture is so needed, of the need to slow down and to pause and to start genuinely walking with God again. In fact, we were reading Screw Tape Letters last night with the college kids, and in that book, Lewis talks about if we can get people to dwell in the future, or if we can get them to dwell in the past, but never the present. And Comer definitely spends a lot of time talking about how to live in the present, how to be less hurried. And then he even points out a few things in terms of how our busyness can pull us away from God. So very well written. And I noticed Jake Schotter, this has become a popular book among a lot of people, but Jake Schotter on Facebook, which if you don't know Jake's a great guy to get to know. But he posted an article about the writing format of this book, and I didn't notice it until he posted that article. But not only is it a very easy book to read, but you can see how small the paragraphs are. Mm-hmm. And so the structure of the book builds a slower paced reading style, but also a very comprehensive reading style. So very, very highly recommended. And then this one I've read numerous times. Again, not by a member of the church, but Francis Chan. There's no denying that Francis Chan is doing a ton of good work in this world. I find it so interesting that a lot of people who are quick to judge non-denominational or non-Church of Christ people, they're the ones who sit on their couch, 80 hours a week and say, well, that guy's not a member of the church. Francis Chan at one point, he's not in it for the money. When he started his congregation, and even when it grew to this huge, what we would call mega church, he refused to take a salary more than $36,000 at the time. He said, 36 is where I can be comfortable and where I can feed my family, and that's all I need. So he's not, this Joel Osteen just taking tons and tons of money. But then he moved his family overseas, and he said, the reason for that is people were a lot more receptive to the gospel overseas. And so if you're going fishing, you have those fishing holes where you know you can go catch a ton of fish. And he said, if you have that certain spot, maybe in a lake or a creek, and you know that you can catch a ton of fish there, if you're going out fishing, why would you not go to that spot, right? You'd be ridiculous to go somewhere else and to try and catch fish when you know that there's a spot where the fish are almost jumping out of the water to be caught. So he's got a very missional mindset, very evangelistic, does a ton of good out in the world. But this book, Crazy Love by Francis Chan, man, it'll step on your toes. There's one chapter in here where he talks about the dangers of being a lukewarm Christian. And I can't remember how many dangers. It was almost like 11 dangers of being a lukewarm Christian. I think it was chapter 7. But a lot of those things, not chapter 7. I'll find it later on. But so many things in this book. And again, he's not going to say, you need to go worship with instruments. You need to go get divorced for unbiblical, not those doctrinal things that we are firm on, but more of how is your spiritual walk with God? How is your relationship with God? So Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. Excellent, excellent book. And then Crazy Love by Francis Chan. Also a very excellent book.
Awesome. I've got those down and we get those in. I've got a couple. The first one is probably where you might think that I would actually start, is going to be actually a set of books. This is very biased of me, but got to throw them out here. The Excelston More Bible Workshop series books. Got to promote these. We've got our 6th one. That'll be out this year in April. Will make its debut over Romans 1 through 8. Authors are Denny Petrillo, Joe Wells, myself, Billy Clayball. Michael Haidt is in one of these. And so each one of these are actual studies of the text, learning, which has to do with the exegetical learning of the text, and then application. And there's faith-building lessons. And this year we've actually changed the building sessions to be a little bit different. We'll have activities and worksheets and kind of a building all around in your spiritual walk. And so definitely check these out. We got them on 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, James, 1 Peter, 2 Peter, and Jude. And in April, we'll have Romans 1 through 8. So you can find these on our website or Kiowa Publications website and buy the set. So that would be my number one. You know that I had to start there. The second one, I've really gone roundabout. I've got one book that I've quoted from a number of times, and I thought I'm going to do that one, but I decided against it so far because I've got another book, and this is really not a spiritual book by any means. It's not written by members of the church. It doesn't really have anything to do with spirituality, but it does have to do with the mentality of people. It has to do with our attitudes and the different challenges that we face as families. It has to do with the workplace. It can be applied to relationships in the church. And it's called Leadership and Self-Deception, and it's by the Arbinger Institute. This is one of the best books that I have read, and has helped me to understand a number of things. We've talked about unity and division and things a lot on here, and this is a book that, in a way, intentionally and unintentionally attacks those very things and discusses the behaviors of people, the behavior of yourself. And so this is geared really toward the workplace, but it has so many applications for us as we go through life, as we work with people. This is an excellent, excellent, excellent book. And you're going to find some of the illustrations that it gives are probably things that you have done. And my wife and I both read this, and whenever we were reading through it, it was funny. She was reading through it first, and then I went through and was reading it, and we were both laughing at the same places because we had done the very thing that this book was talking about. And I'll give one illustration. Maybe we've given it before, or maybe not, but in talking about self-deception, the idea is that every person is created for good. You're essentially wired in a certain way. And when you deceive yourself, when you go against yourself, you have some tendencies. And so there's an illustration in here that says that you and your wife are in bed and you have a newborn baby, and you're trying to get that baby to, you've put her or him in the crib, and maybe they're in their own room and they're crying. And so when the baby starts crying, you, as we'll just say the husband, have a natural reaction to say that I need to get up and go take care of the baby. Well, it was a thought. It was something you knew you needed to do, but then you deceived yourselves and you did not do it. And so because you did not do it, now your mindset changes. Instead of, I need to go take care of the baby so that she can get some sleep or whatever, now it becomes, why isn't she getting up? And after a little bit of time, if she doesn't get up, why doesn't she respect me as her husband? Why I work all day, I provide for this family. Now she doesn't respect me as a man, as a father, as her husband. And you go into this wormhole of things. And he discusses the idea of people going into their box and how self-deception places you there, which really creates a bad atmosphere in your mind and really affects your behavior toward other people. So Leadership, Self-Deception is a great book by the Arbinger Institute. And so that'll be my second book for today. I highly recommend it. They actually have, I think, 5 or 6 different books over a few different things. I have them all. Excellent book. So be sure to check that out. All right. Well, we hope that those things help you. We'll have all those linked for you, and you can check those out. So, guys, you ready to get into the main discussion here for the next few minutes? We've entered into our pretty much our second to last statement or segment here, which is over worship. And I know probably some of our books that we have mentioned have something to do or could definitely affect the way we think. But in worship, what are some traditional things that we hold? Songs, schedules, things like that. What has worked and has not worked with tradition inside of worship? What are some new traditions that maybe you have started or seen? And what are some things in worship that are not tradition? I know that that this can become kind of depending on where you are in the U.S. even, there are some different traditional things that many different congregations have done. What are some of those things that you've seen that are? Let's start out with this. What are some bad traditions? Let's start with the negative. What are some bad traditions that we have seen within worship that have maybe or could maybe negatively affect the body that meets in a local area? So I'll just throw this out there. We'll start there.
Well, I would say maybe 2 right off the bat. First of all, is how we are arranged in our worship, in our assembling together. I've always thought that, people want to say, well, if I could go back to Bible times and I could see, the Red Sea opened up, or if I could see Jesus walk on water, or that would be fascinating. But I would like to go back to the first century and just see worship. Just worship with the church in the first century. And for the most part, I think it was probably a group gathering together. Probably it was more like, Tyler, you were talking about y'all getting together as a college group. I think y'all are studying the Screw Tape Letter still maybe. And you're probably sitting around your living room in a circle, I would guess, like a youth devotional or something like that is usually done. I think that was probably sitting around a table or sitting around a room, was the way that it was done. And everybody's, as you're singing, you're looking at each other. But the way most of our church buildings are set up now is more like the, Greek auditoriums or amphitheaters were set up, where you had a stage area and then rows of seats going back, and everyone's looking at one individual or two individuals, whatever's up on the stage, kind of like a performance. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with our being that way, but if you've ever, as a song leader, and I've done this several times, tell everybody to stand and face the center of the room, and we're going to sing this next song. It's funny how awkward that feels to everyone when you're looking at people, and that singing to one another, teaching one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, looking at the faces of each other. First of all, we're probably less likely to go to sleep during worship, during the sermon. But more than that, the connection that you have, I don't know. That's one of those things that if I was in charge of building the church building, I think I would have maybe a elevated area in the middle and then seats all the way around, so that everyone was kind of looking across at each other as they're looking at whoever's leading singing or preaching or whatever it might be. The other thing is the formality. I think if we went back to the first century, there would be a whole lot less formality involved. And, I'm not, we sometimes confuse, we've talked about this before, we sometimes confuse formality with reverence. And, for some people, you have to be formal to be reverent. And I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with that to a certain extent until we get the formality is the main thing. And sometimes we do that. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite, I remember it to this day like it was yesterday, one of my favorite worship services that I've ever been a part of was when we were in Denver, and there was they were predicting on a Saturday through the night this massive blizzard they were given, that we were going to get up to 2 to 3 feet of snow, and we didn't. But we still got, 15 or 16 inches. But whiteout conditions, and basically they locked down the city, and we called off services and everything. Well, we get up the next morning, and one of the students that lived up in the mountains had came down to spend the night with us, just in case we had services that Sunday. We had decided that our family of 5 and this student was going to worship together that morning, together in our living room. And I just put it on Facebook that if you'd like to come worship with us, I was hoping maybe some of the folks in my neighborhood that I'd been inviting to church services would take me up on it. But I started having members from Bear Valley call and say, "Hey, do you mind if we come over and worship with y'all?" And I'm like, "Sure." And next thing I knew, including Tyler's family, his wife's family, were all there. We had probably 25 people. And Melody made a big pot of soup that morning for us. Well, little hint, if you pour a bunch of chicken broth in the pot of soup, it'll stretch and go farther. And, we pulled out, we had a 20-pound bag of baked potatoes we threw in the oven. And, but we worshiped, and then we all ate together, and everybody just hung out the rest of the day. Like the ladies were in one room chit-chatting, the guys were in one room watching football, the kids were down in the basement playing. And everyone that was there that day, if you bring up worship to them, they're like, "That's my favorite worship I've ever been a part of." But there was nothing formal about it. It was just kind of a thrown together kind of thing. And anyway, those are two, I think, bad traditions we've got into, of the formality and the lack of connection with each other in our worship.
Yeah, I agree. And college ministry has opened up unique experiences for me. I think college ministry is unique in a lot of different ways, and it's been such a blessing in a lot of different ways. But one of the things is I'm working with some college students who have never been to church before. And so they'll come to church, and it's always very interesting to get their feedback afterwards. And I know and I understand that our worship is not supposed to be geared for the visitor. It's supposed to be geared toward, disciples who are reaching out to God. At the same rate, I think that there should be, this open-mindedness of what are we doing? Because sometimes we do stuff, right? That's the whole point of tradition, is we do stuff time and time again for hundreds of years, and we never change because it works, and I'm not going to change. If it's working, then why change it? And I think that that's fine for the most part. But one of the things that has become a big struggle for some of these college students who are either new to the faith or they've never been to church before are some of the songs that we sing. Some of the songs that are written, man, I'll even say even before 1940, they are very hard to understand. A friend and me were joking one time, if we've gone through a preaching school and then gone on to master's degrees and have spent all this time studying and researching and digging, and we're having trouble interpreting what we're singing, then how do you think someone who is brand new to the faith or doesn't even know a story of Abraham or doesn't know who Moses is, or there's a book, and I certainly don't agree with his stance on a lot of things, but Chris Altrock, he wrote this book called Preaching to Pluralists. And we live in a world and a culture where people are becoming so biblically illiterate that a lot of people don't know those basic stories. And sure, maybe an older generation will sit there and mock them and say, well, I just can't believe that the world is coming to this, and I can't believe that people don't know God anymore. But that's not going to solve the problem, right? Sitting there complaining and grumbling isn't going to solve the problem. And neither is, how we've been worshiping for the last 150 years. Some of these songs, I was looking up A Mighty Fortress, which poetically, if you give me time, Martin Luther is the author of it in 1529. If you give me enough time, the theological inferences in there, it's amazing. And the poetry is beautiful. However, when you're singing, you're moving at such a fast pace that you don't have time to interpret what you're seeing on the screen. Well, the second line in that song, a bulwark never failing, you've lost me. And the second line, you've lost me. A helper he amid the flood of mortal ills prevailing, for still our ancient foe does seek to work us woe. What? I mean, again, yeah, right. You give me time, and if I'm reading it right now, I think, well, yeah, of course. God is this mighty fortress, the foe being Satan. He's going to constantly work against us. Sure. But when you're singing, you're moving. And for a lot of people, younger and older, who are coming to church for the first time, or maybe even people who just need a little bit more encouragement and knowledge of the scriptures, that song is almost worthless in terms of interpretation. So I think traditionally, I think every church has their playlist of like 50 songs, 50 to 100 songs, I would say. And those are the songs that we know. Those are the songs that we sing really well because we know the tune. We know the words, even though we may not know what the words are saying. We know the words, and it makes us sound good. We're not stumbling through. And if you've ever been in a congregation where they're trying to learn a new song and everyone is singing mismatched parts and it just sounds like this big, massive mess of music, then we understand how awkward that can be. And, well, forbid that we, try and learn something like that if we're going to have to struggle through it. North Mac is actually doing something that has had tremendous success called a recharge class on Wednesday nights in the fall. While we have our normal class offerings, there's also just a class called Recharge, and all it is singing. So they'll have song leaders, and they'll introduce 4 or 5 new songs and a mix of other things. And then they'll also have moments of like a 2-minute silence. So they'll sing, and then they'll just take a brief 2-minute pause, and that's your choice. You can either pray, you can reflect on the words that you just sang. They'll have a scripture up on the screen, all these other things. And we found that a lot of people on Wednesday night, they may not be in the mindset that they're ready to learn. They may not be, freshly minded. They might be so beaten down by their work day or their work week or even school week that, you just need to sing and you need to worship. So they've been introducing some of the new songs in there, and that's been very good. And then once they have that group, we usually have about 60, 65 in that recharge class. Well, then they'll migrate that into Sunday morning and allow us to have some of these newer songs. But I think some of the just traditions of our worship, like what Corey was saying, the formality and how that equates reverence. And that certainly isn't the case, that formality always dictates reverence. I think people could be irreverent wearing a suit. In fact, you go to Wall Street and check that out. I mean, formality does not always equate reverence. But in the same way, I think some of the songs that we sing, even me, I'm not saying that I'm advanced by any means in my knowledge of Scripture, but when I read Martin Luther's words from 1526, it takes me a little bit to decipher and interpret. And singing should be from the heart. And some of these newer songs that we're singing are just, they get me. There's one song I know, again, Martin Luther, he's not a member of the church. We sing that song. But there's one song, Yet Not I, But Christ Through Me. Mm-hmm. My goodness, I can't make it through that song. The words are simple enough, and the concept is prevalent enough in our spiritual walk that it just makes such a difference. And I think that's in part of worshiping in truth and in spirit, like John 4:24 says.
Yeah, I agree. I'll tell you that I was took the kids down to T3, which is a big youth conference at the Louisville congregation in Louisville, Texas, and man, it was great. I don't know what the final count was as far as the registration for the actual event, but I can tell you that Sunday morning, which obviously had, the members at Louisville, there was 1,071 of us on Sunday morning for worship. And there was probably close to 900 on Friday night when everybody got there. Well, Friday, we got there right on time. It started at 8 o'clock, and we left here. It's almost it's a 3-hour, 45-minute drive. So we got the kids. We went down there, and we went straight to our hotel, and then ran over to the building and got in there. And exactly what Tyler just described is what affected me. We sat down, and as they begin, there's about at least 25 to 30 minutes of singing. And that's how it is every year. And you get, almost 900 kids in the same room, and you get somebody who actually knows the songs and will lead. There were several songs that I did not get through. And just amazing. Songs like The Goodness of God. Man, I love that song. And there were some new ones that we sung, but some, older ones that I've sung for a long time, Sanctuary. There's just a lot of different songs that we sung, but there is a difference. And you guys tell me if you agree or disagree with this, but there seems to be a difference between our typical worship service and a worship service where it's made up primarily of our youth. There's a difference. And in both, we do the same things. For instance, Sunday morning, although it was most of the congregation, we sang. We heard a great lesson by Brett Petrillo, who was just fantastic. We took the Lord's Supper. We prayed. We did all the things that you should be doing and for a worship service. But it's more loose, if you will. I don't know if that's the right word. Maybe a better word is relaxed. It seems that one negative downfall of traditional worship, wherever you are, because we know every congregation has its own culture, and that culture has been built by generations, and it's been the things that we have done. And I have nothing against, doing things the same way. I'm not completely against that idea. But when you are able to just chill and relax a little bit and not be so uptight about everything. You got to do 3 songs. You got to do, your prayer cannot be over this. If you preach over this, length, then, we're going to have problems. We get so caught up in time limits, and we get so caught up in what everybody's got to wear. Maybe I think that may be being a little bit more relaxed, possibly. I'm not sure, but at least what I've seen around where I am, there are just things like that we're almost so afraid of any type of change that we really just fight against it. And I think that really is a negative downfall of the traditional things that we've done through the years. And like I said, I don't have a problem with, every congregation has its own culture, their own tradition, whatever. Maybe they do the Lord's Supper before the sermon. Maybe they do it after. Either way, I don't really care. There's good reasons for each one. But if we're so scared to change everything, man, what a downfall. If somebody new comes in and they want to sing 2 extra songs, or if somebody's got really something that's on their heart and they've got a little bit longer prayer, and you're so uptight that you're more worried about schedule than the actual reason you're there, that's just a horrible thing. And so I think that's one of the downfalls of the scheduling tradition that we've had throughout the years that really hinders our worship. And that makes everybody just uncomfortable. And so the uptightness of keeping things the way that they are, it affects your singing, your praying, it affects the sermon, just all parts of worship. And I really do notice that when I do go to a youth event, which is done exactly the way it'd be done wherever you are on a Sunday night or a Sunday morning, man, it is so much more relaxed. There's not hardly any songs other than maybe Our God, He is Alive that you might sing, and there might be 1 or 2 in there that you might sing traditionally. But the new songs, they sing out. I mean, the singing is amazing. Affirming the Faith here in a few weeks, that singing is great. But sometimes we get so caught up in our schedule and what we've done forever that the singing is affected, the prayers are affected because we are so uptight about worship, we forget why we're there. And I think that's a really horrible negative effect of what traditionalism has done to our worship services. And we have built that within our culture, and we're so afraid of any type of change that we're really uncomfortable if something is slightly different whenever we are worshiping. So that's some of the negative that I have seen. And I'll say this, that if you're listening to us, we certainly are not wanting to be a negative influence, or we don't want to just harp on the bad things that we see. But just like my football coaches used to say, if you want to get better, you need to know what's wrong. You need to know things that aren't working as well. And you got to work on those things so that you can get better. And so you continue to bring those things up. So now we've looked at the negative. So what are some positive things? How about that? What are some positive things that we can gain from some of the traditions that we have seen, maybe in our own congregations or in others that we have visited?
Well, particularly if you start traditions that are different, it makes you think about, why are we doing that? And even if it's something as simple as, like, the way we do the ending of our services is we don't end our worship service with a closing prayer. We have worship at 9 and on Sunday mornings, and then Bible class at 10, which I love because as a preacher, I can go to Bible class and not be thinking about my sermon. And, I've always thought it's kind of funny how we get all the kids hyped up in Bible class and then say, all right, go sit still for an hour. And that's hard on them. But we have announcements at the end of our worship service, and then we will have a final prayer typically about what we were just announcing, those that are sick or whatever. And then we have a song at the end of our service that allows our teachers to leave the auditorium and get to the classrooms before. And at the end of that song, we're dismissed. Well,
yeah,
you can always tell the visitors because they're like looking around like, what do we do? You know, there's not an amen to end worship on. So, yeah. And
that's the official close of worship.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's part of, I mean, it makes you think about the why that's behind what we're doing. If you can just work through that, and that helps us be more intentional with our worship and more encouraging to each other, I think.
Yeah.
I think one tradition that most churches have, that I've grown to really, really love and appreciate is Wednesday night class. Man, we just feel so filled when we're done with a Wednesday night. And I love that, Garrett, kind of like what you were saying. It's a lot more relaxed. It's a lot more laid back. It's crazy how there's a detachment from Sunday to Wednesday, but where we can just show up. No one is overly concerned with how you're dressed. I mean, it's a very casual, laid back Bible class format. A lot of times, every Wednesday we get a meal with the college students before Bible class, and that's been a really, really, really good time of fellowship. We take over. We have a Slim Chickens right near North Mac, and we flood that place with 20 college students at one time. And they've got a big, long table right in the middle, and we go in there and eat for about an hour, and then we go to Bible class afterward. But I think Wednesday nights are just, whoever had that idea of, hey, we don't have to wait until Sunday to worship. We could meet on Wednesday. They were definitely onto something. And then we try and meet as much as we can throughout the week. And I think that's the model of the New Testament church is, you don't have to wait until Wednesday to ask so-and-so how their life is going, or you don't have to wait until Sunday to ask for prayer requests. But this regular, normal system of, talking with people and congregating and fellowshipping and enjoying God's kingdom here instead of only hoping for it in eternity. I think that's been a great thing for us this Wednesday nights.
Yeah, that really is. That really is a good thing. As much as we talk about the negative of the traditional things that we do, I think that we do forget to talk about the positive effects of the traditional things that we do. There are some that are not so good, and there's some that are great. I am so glad, just like you said, Tyler, I'm so glad that we have held on to the Sunday night or the second service. Different congregations have that in different forms, and the Wednesday night. It's such a building up of the people. I'm thankful that we have developed certain traditions from a biblical mindset because we feel that it's important for the edification of our congregations. I'm thankful for some of the traditional things, and like everybody has something different. I love this schedule that you guys have, Corey. I know others do, that you have worship first and then Bible class after. We do a church style format. I think North Mac is more of the old traditional church or Bible class church, and then we come back at 5 or 6 o'clock. Maybe that's wrong. I think that's how it is at North Mac, isn't it? But anyway, there are things that are really good. I love the fact that we do have and announce to our congregations, things such as the prayer list. I believe that it's a really good thing that we do hold to certain songs that we sing by way of reminder. I think that's the only way that we have, I know Myron Bruce always calls it, and I've heard it by others. They call this what did he say? The Church of Christ national anthem or something like that. Our God, He is alive. don't really care to call it that, but that does seem to be a song that no matter where you are, if that song is sung, there's more power to that song than any other song that you sing during the worship service. People really get into that. Well, that's based on the tradition, and we keep singing that, and that we feel this is important because now it's almost like people feel like they're taking a stance, and it's a great chant. Our God, He is alive, and I think that's a positive thing. I think there's other, positive things that have come from it. There, just the pride that we take within our worship services. You have everybody has somebody in their congregation that is wanting to make sure that the things that we are doing are proper. And I don't see anything wrong with that. And so those are, we have a sense of pride about the worship that we give and wanting to make sure things are done in an orderly fashion. But again, I think that there's a healthy balance that needs to take place. If it weren't for, of course, doctrine along with some traditional ideas, we probably would not be still singing a cappella. Because there have been so many who have, of course, left the doctrine about a cappella singing, but there is some traditional things that have happened as a result of a cappella singing. So, of course, we can get into all that here now that we've kind of noticed some positive things, but we have traditional things that we do, and there are biblical things that we do. So let's talk about, for just a little minute, what are the biblical things of worship that we cannot abandon no matter what?
Yeah, I think Lord's Supper, definitely.
Yeah.
One of the big things, I think a lot of people have become very lax on it. I always
I think if you went back to that first century worship, you would find that it was a much bigger deal in their worship than we've made it.
Yeah.
As I say, I joked during COVID that we turned it into a fast food communion, just with how quick we'd go through it. And, we revolutionized things with the rip and sips much faster. We don't have to wait for trays to be passed out. I mean, we've really become efficient at the Lord's Supper. And in part, I think that's a shame.
It is.
I think when you look at the Lord's Supper, not only in Scripture, but in church history, in some of the early church fathers, it was one of the main reasons why they met on Sunday morning.
Yep.
Not Sunday morning, but Sunday. Sorry, there's tradition creeping in already. But mornings are biblical in Scripture. We can see that for sure. But I just think that time to pause, and every 7 days, you just remember why you're doing what you're doing and why you're living the way that you're living. And it's not only a memorial, it's a celebration, it's a time of remembrance. And we've even kind of pigeonholed the Lord's Supper into just a handful of verses of, remember, I hear this all the time. We do this in remembrance of the death of Christ and his sacrifice. Well, yeah, but Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me. And when he said that, he wasn't crucified yet. Mm-hmm. He's talked about his whole life. And even then, you think about when the apostles, you look at Acts 1, and they gazed up into heaven. They were fixated on the fact that Jesus just descended into heaven. What was the first Lord's Supper like after his ascension? It wasn't a time of, mourning or grief. It was, connecting all the dots and realizing, wow, the plan of God is far beyond what we ever could have thought or dreamed up. But B, we are taking this in remembrance of the Christ who came to this world, lived for us, died for us, and continues to live and sustain us. And he gave his Spirit to us. That first Lord's Supper would have been amazing. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, we're stuck at the cross. And certainly it's a great place to visit, but not a place to live. And I know that probably even sounds filled with heresy, but Jesus went to the tomb and he was raised, and he ascended up into heaven. That's where he sits right now. That's the present state of the Christ, is in heaven ruling.
Yeah.
And, that Lord's Supper is a bond of him saying, you are my disciples. You are followers of me. You will gain this. I mean, Paul's reiteration of the resurrection time and time again in his lengthy discussion of it in 1 Corinthians 15, man, that's powerful. That's a supper of hope. So anyways, I think we cannot move on taking the Lord's Supper every Sunday, and B, we shouldn't seek efficiency in how we do it. I don't think that should be the ruling principle of it.
I agree.
Yeah, and as a to go along with that, as a preacher, maybe I'm not the source for this idea, but I think we should remove every clock from every church building auditorium.
Yeah.
Because we do get that efficiency idea of how long is a sermon supposed to be? How many? Well, he sang an extra song. Well, the guy that's leading our thoughts at the Lord's Supper took a little extra time, whatever, and we've got to be done at a certain time or whatever. And I think sometimes we get into that mindset, and it's just we've sometimes can become, and I'll talk about this more when we do our wrap up thoughts, but in the Old Testament there was very few times that they quit going to the temple to worship, but God was very often displeased with their sacrifices and worship. And it was because they were doing the stuff, but they weren't focusing on what they were supposed to, and it can become, you were talking about the difference in the way we worship sometime and that those events that a lot of youth are at or whatever. Why, if you're leading singing, do you look around and see so many people not singing? Why, when you're preaching, do you look around and see so many people that are, not paying attention or whatever? And I get there's things that, maybe you've got a sore throat and that's why you're not singing or whatever. But sometimes it's, we focus so much on the fulfilling, checking the checklist of, all right, so we prayed, we sang, we studied together, we took the Lord's Supper, we gave of our means. All right, now we can go home and eat some fried chicken. And I love the Psalms, of course, and when you go through the Psalms, how often, when you go through Paul's writings, how often Paul will be writing something and then he just breaks out into doxology. I just got to stop and praise God. That's the way it ought to be, that we understand worship is not somewhere we go. Worship is something we do in response to what God has done for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some of that, what you're talking about, definitely goes back to some of the traditional things, right? We're so uptight about worship. If it goes 1 minute over what we think for the sermon or anything, that can affect everything. And here's the one thing that we cannot abandon for worship. We talk a lot about meeting on the first day of the week. That is a biblical command. We see that by example all throughout the book of Acts. 1 Corinthians 16:2, I believe it is, says they met on every first day of the week. That is a commemoration of the resurrection of Jesus. He rose from the dead on the first day of the week. That's the day that we commemorate and remember, what he did. That, of course, goes along with the pattern of the Old Testament that they remembered the Sabbath day and kept it holy because the seventh day he rested because of the deliverance from Egypt. There are a few things that go into the keeping of that. So that's something that we cannot get away from, and a lot of different religious groups have gotten away from that. We can't get away from prayer. Prayer is something that is commanded a number of times within worship. It's commanded all throughout our life. We can't get away from the Lord's Supper. That is one of the sole reasons why we're there. I mean, there's so many things that we cannot get away from, but here is one thing that I just don't hear enough of. If we're talking about worship, we cannot get away from the fact that when we worship, we're at the throne of God. We have come together for the purpose of lifting up our Lord and all that he's done. We've come together for the purpose of lifting one another up during that time of worship, because now we're coming together as literally the family of God. The very first thing that I say every Sunday whenever I get behind the pulpit is, hello family, or something about that. Good morning family, because I want people to know we really are the family of God. Whether we know each other or not, we're family in Christ. And we cannot get away from the fact that we are children going before the throne of the Father. And so the audience here needs to be a bigger focus here. So if I do have problems going on, and I realize that worship can be really hard if you are going through something horrible, emotionally, spiritually, physically, whatever, it can be really hard because you're so, maybe you're damaged emotionally in some way as a result of whatever. I get that. That can make worship hard. I get that worship can be somewhat hard if you have young children, because you're trying to train them to sit through worship and all that, and maybe they're giving you a hard time, and you've got to take care of those things. I realize that worship can be hard at that point, and so for those young parents, I'm going to say keep doing what you're doing. It's gonna get better. So I realize that worship can be hard, but we've got to remember this: that God has called us to go to Him in all times of our life. So if things are really bad, who do you go to? If things are really good, who do you go to? If things are really stressful, who do you go to? Worship is the best time to go to God, because you can go to Him with the rest of your family. And we have developed this mindset within our congregations, or let me restate that. We have developed this mindset within ourselves that we want to be so secretive about our problems that we don't want even our church family to know about our problem, let alone God. So we try to hide and keep all that down deep inside, and therefore it affects our worship. But we don't talk about the fact that we should never get away from the fact that God is our God and we are His children, and that is such a major part of worship. Forget everything else we've been commanded to do. There is a reason you're there in the first place, and that's because God is your creator and because God has offered you salvation. We've got to remember that, because that's what leads in every other part of worship that we go through, and I think that that's something that we cannot let go of.
Yep.
What else? Is there anything else we want to talk about that we cannot break free from? Or do we think we've hit it?
Well, we could probably go on for another 3 hours on that topic.
We probably could.
If you leave that without a punctuation.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. And I'm sure Corey's about to hit this, but there are things that God has commanded us to do in worship that we should never get away from. And there are things that man has created for worship that we can get away from. In some cases, probably should. But either way, we have to have a healthy balance between doctrine, commands, and our traditional things. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our good friend Corey for our anchoring thought for the week.
Well, I was thinking about John chapter 4, and Jesus is with the Samaritan woman at the well, and when she realizes, that she says, "Sir, I perceive you're a prophet," you can go through and follow those different words that she calls him and see how she's changing her opinion on him. But when she realizes he's a prophet, she wants to talk religion, but she doesn't want to talk about religion about her life. She doesn't want to talk about her husband's situation in her home and what her life is. She wants to talk about kind of generic doctrine. And that's the way sometimes conversations about worship can become. So she asked Jesus about, we worship on this mountain, and y'all say that, talking about the Jews say that Jerusalem is where we're supposed to worship. Where are we supposed to worship at? And that's the context of him talking about that line that we quote so many times about God being a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And that's Jesus trying to get the conversation back on topic to talk about the character of the person. We can talk about where we worship, that's the truth, but we also need to talk about the character of the person or the heart of the person, and that's the spirit. And I think sometimes when we get to talking about tradition and non-tradition and some of those aspects about our worship, we focus so much on the truth, and I'm not saying that's not important, but we leave aside the spiritual side of that. I can do all the right things in all the right places, but if my spirit is not in line with God, who is a spirit, then it does no good. It's not acceptable worship. And her spirit wasn't right because her marriages were not okay. Jesus is basically going to tell her, you got to get that right. If you're going to relate to God successfully, then you got to relate to him soul to soul, mind to mind, spirit to spirit, and in truth. But you've got to line up with him, a spiritual being, with your soul, with your spirit. And there's, again, a number of Old Testament passages that teach that same thing, like Isaiah 1 and Jeremiah 7 and throughout the Psalms, the minor prophets over and over. You can't live one day, or one way rather, 6 days a week, and then come to church on Sunday and think that our spirit is in line with God. So whatever traditions that, we don't want to bind those on people or whatever, but whatever traditions that are involved in our worship or are not involved in our worship is certainly a matter we can discuss. There's some doctrinal things that we've got to do in certain ways in order to be right in the sight of God. But if I could encourage us to do anything, no matter what we're talking about, whether it's doctrinal things in our worship or tradition things in our worship, let's make sure that first and foremost that we're lining up our spirit with God, who is a spirit, and that the purpose of our coming together is we want to praise him and honor him, that we want to encourage one another as we assemble together for that worship. But it all begins with, am I a person who is trying to live my life in subjection to the Lord, in response to his mercy and grace? And if I am, then that's going to impact and affect our worship when we assemble together on the Lord's Day more than anything else. So that's the encouragement I would give to you, and hopefully as we think about that throughout the Monday through Saturday, it helps us when we assemble together on Sunday.
Yeah, that's great. One thing I've been thinking about, especially over the last couple of weeks, is just how much when you consistently work on, and I know that we all struggle with this, me included, when you consistently strive to build a relationship with God, you grow to have a greater respect for all that he's consistently doing for you, and you grow to have a healthier love of the people that are involved in all this with you. So other Christians, and I don't even know if we should use that word, other disciples, other followers of Christ who are truly striving to do that. And I think you could probably put a few different types of people in that bubble, but those who are in Christ, you grow to have a healthier love for them. I was talking to my friend, buddy Joe Wells, the other day, and we were texting about some stuff, and he has a new book that's out, and I'll probably throw that on here maybe in a couple episodes. But, I told him, I said, man, I'm just so proud of all that you're doing. And he wrote back, and this is just personal conversation, right? So maybe I should or should not share it, but he just told me, he said, you know what? I love you, and I'm so glad that we're in this together. That's how I feel about you guys. And that's how I feel about so many other people who are involved in the Lord's work, no matter what that looks like. And if everybody would come to our worship services with that mindset, we'd probably forget a little bit more about our problems, or we would probably be a little bit more apt to share our problems. Because I can promise you this, that whatever you're going through, somebody else is too. And they may or may not be struggling more than you. And so if we would remember how much we love one another and how much we need one another, and remember that we're all on the same team, that might affect our worship services a little bit more, to where we sing out a little bit more, we pray a little bit harder, we pay a little bit more attention, and worship means just that much more to us. I don't know. That's my opinion. Well, guys, I'm so, this has been a great conversation. I am just really thankful for you guys, thankful for all of you who are tuning in to the Untied Podcast, who have followed us all this time. We greatly appreciate you. We do hope that you would drop us a line, a question if you have one, a comment. We would love to hear from you. We do hope that you will share this if you found some enjoyment of this, if you feel like this is helping you, benefiting you in some way. We do hope that you'll share it with others within your life, your congregation, as we strive to grow this podcast. And we do want to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by the Excel Pod Network, which is a greater work of the Excel Stimore Inc. It is a network that has several podcasts on it, and so we want you to check those out on our website, excelstimore.net. Guys, it's been a great time being with you today. We do hope that the Lord will continue to bless all of you who have been listening or maybe tuning in on Excel TV or YouTube or wherever it is that you are joining us. We hope that the Lord will continue to bless you in your daily walk with Him. If there's anything that we can do to serve you in any way, please let us know. And so thank you. We love you. We hope that you'll tune in with us next week. Remember, this show comes out each Thursday at noon, and so we'd love to be able to talk with you again. So until next time, we pray that Lord will continue to bless you, and we hope that you will stay untied.